Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. Let's take tech in the right direction to drive social change and close the employment, pay, and culture gap for women in technology. This podcast is focused on helping turn ideas into action to create opportunities for women to advance in the dynamic technology industry. I hope this podcast will inspire and motivate you to encourage more women and girls to seek or grow a career as a woman in technology. Stories about the journey of amazing women in this tech field starts right now. Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. Today I will be speaking with Tiffani Bova. Tiffani is the Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce and the author of the Wallstreet Journal and 800 CEO Read best-selling book, Growth IQ. Bova was recently named to Thinkers 50 Radar Class of 2019 and was Thinker of the Month in December 2018. She appeared on MSNBC and Yahoo Finance, among others, and was featured in the January 2019 issue of Rotman Management Magazine Disruption issue. She has also contributed to publications including Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Huffington Post, and is a frequent guest on Wharton Business Radio and a variety of industry-leading podcasts. Bova is a top influencer in customer experience, digital transformation, the future of work, and sales. And she's recently recognized as one of Inc. magazine's 37 sales experts you need to follow on Twitter, a LinkedIn top sales expert to follow in 2019, a top 100 women in tech, a Brand Quarterly magazine top 50 marketing thought leader, and one of the most powerful and influential women in California, according to the National Diversity Council. Her book, Growth IQ, was one of 800 CEO Read's top 5 strategy and leadership books of 2018, and the #1 Salesforce Dreamforce bookseller in 2018. Having delivered over 500 keynote presentations on sales transformation and a business model innovation to 400,000 people on 6 continents, Bova is highly sought after keynote speaker. Prior to working with Salesforce, she was a distinguished analyst and research fellow at Gartner, where she won the Thought Leadership Award and earned accolades from the best leaders in the technology world for her cutting-edge analysis and her skill at inventing bold strategies for growth. Bova has also lived in the fast lane of high-tech leading sales, marketing, and customer service organizations, driving growth and creating durable competitive advantages for startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, such as Sprint, Intercom, Interland, and also Gateway Computers. Throughout, she learned how to lead sales and marketing teams in hotly competitive markets. She is considered one of the early pioneers of cloud-based sales strategies and completely reinvented indirect go-to-market tactics in several hardware and services businesses. Her high-velocity years at the front lines also gave Bova the hands-on experience executives crave in their strategic partners and made her an authentic, passionate, and brilliant advocate committed to her clients' success and prosperity. Welcome to the show, Tiffani. I am so excited to have you on today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Jennifer. It's my pleasure.
Great. Let's just jump right in. Can you share with us and our listeners your career journey and how you got to where you are today?
Oh, my goodness. So I always like to joke that everything I learned about business, I learned at the carnival, and people go, what? Like, that's random, not an MBA, not undergraduate business, degree. No, everything I learned was at a carnival. I worked at a friend of mine, my best friend's parents owned indoor arcades and outdoor carnivals, and I'm born and raised in Hawaii. And so we had great weather all the time. But what it taught me was how to market, how to sell, how to order, supply chain, all the different literally the pile of teddy bear fur, which one's more expensive, like, crazy things like that. But I find myself leaning on everything I learned back then all the time. And so I knew I had caught the business bug, especially in kind of the sales and marketing angle. And then I stumbled across technology probably in my late 20s, and started selling technology, and then kind of worked my way up. I was selling myself, then I started managing teams, and then from teams I started running groups and divisions, and was very, very early in the web. It was called, the World Wide Web back then, sort of 2000 to 2004. And then I got an opportunity to work at Gartner. So I was a research analyst for a decade. Became a research fellow, actually covering sales transformation and routes to market through indirect channels. And now I've been at Salesforce for 4.5 years. And so it's been an interesting jig-jag kind of journey. But at the end of the day, I think I'm exactly where I was supposed to be. So, and I guess along the way, I wrote a book in the last couple of years. I did that.
Yeah,
too.
just along the way. You're just amazing.
Just along the way.
You're just so amazing. And your career journey has taken, like you said, zigzags, but really very fruitful and just where your passion is, right in business. So I have to tell you, I really love your podcast, and it's called What's Next. So tell us more about how you decided to start it and what it's all about.
Well, I have the pleasure of most of the time, not obviously at this moment in our history, but I usually am on the road every week giving a keynote somewhere in the world. Last year, I flew a little north of 370,000 miles. I was in 6 continents, gave 100 keynotes, and I am backstage a lot with these really fascinating and interesting people. And I meet a lot of executives and have really inspiring conversations. And I felt almost selfish in having them by myself. And so I said, maybe I'll launch a podcast to have these conversations I've been so blessed to have, all on my own, and instead have them, with these people on a podcast. And so that's how it happened. And it was great because when I first reached out to everybody, kind of in my first hit list, everyone said yes. Mm-hmm. And so I was fortunate that was the case. And now it's just become something that is almost a master class for me in 25 minutes on a particular topic. And I get to ask all kinds of really interesting and compelling questions. And then I've, learned so much. It's changed my talk track. It's changed my perspective on things. I've learned about things I knew nothing about. I learned about things I don't care to know anything more about. And so, but I'm doing it on a podcast in front of, the people that listen to it. And it's done fairly well. I think people enjoy the conversation and the format and the style and the guests I have on. So I've been really fortunate.
Very, very informative, but still very exciting to listen to. I listen to almost every episode of your podcast. So you're doing an amazing job, and I love it. And like you said, you learn from every one of those interviews, so much that it's so powerful. So I know you said along the way in your zigzag journey, you got into the technology field. Can you think about what that moment was that sparked you to get into technology? What was that said, wow, this is a field I love? I know how you connect it to business, but what about technology do you love, and what sparked that interest?
Well, I can tell you that, to sort of date this, I had my first laptop in college. So I got that in 1986, literally. Mm-hmm. And it was a dual disk drive, NEC, floppy disk, WordPerfect, green screen, MS-DOS with dial-up.
I'm right there with you.
I'm rocking and rolling. And I had a flip phone and, whole 9 yards. But so I was never afraid of technology. And a friend of mine actually had created this amazing algorithm and Boolean search capability long before the web. So this is sort of 1991, 92-ish. And because of my sales and marketing capability, he's like, hey, will you come in and just, help us out? And so it didn't matter sort of what I was marketing, quote unquote, or what I was selling. And so I accidentally found myself in technology. Then I realized the power of all the things it could change, for business, for society, for education, for, you just see this possibility. And so I fell in love with being able to help companies really think differently and reimagine how they can do what they do. So I sort of cut my teeth initially in selling into the legal profession, which was, not one that was very embraceful of technology early on. But and I was probably one of the few women that was selling technology back then during that time. So it was a great learning experience, and the power of selling by an industry or vertical and knowing that industry and vertical really, really well, becoming a student of the profession of like how to sell solutions instead of point products, learning and being trained on multiple platforms. Back then it was Compaq or it was HP or it was Cisco, or, it wasn't everybody that we have today from a cloud perspective. So I think I caught the bug on the art of the possible and really forcing my creativity to step in. But knowing that sales and marketing and service was really where, my superpower laid.
That's great. So, I'll be dating myself and tell you that I got my first computer back at the same time you did. It was an IBM XT, and it had dual drives, and I paid $6,000 for that computer, and I took all my savings and I bought my first computer, and it was just amazing because solving business problems was really my passion. And when I saw that technology can solve business problems, it really got me excited. So my first business was going out to video stores and sorting their video list in alphabetical order, because they hand wrote them and they were not in alphabetical order, and it was just so fun. I actually made quite a bit of money doing that for a few years initially, but just to solve that business problem for those stores was uh, really exciting to me. So that first computer, kind of reminded me of that story.
Stay tuned for the rest of today's interview after a brief word from our sponsor. Are you an expert in your field? Are you a woman who values thought leadership? We'd love to have you join us as a guest on an upcoming episode of Tech in the Right Direction. Visit us at directionstraining.com/podcast to apply today. While there, be sure to check out Directions Training's newest initiative, the WIT Cloud Power Scholarship for Azure Fundamentals Certification. This year, we have offered 100 scholarships to women for the Microsoft Azure Fundamentals Training course, valued at $950 per student, as an opportunity to start their pathway to becoming a Microsoft certified professional. Help us continue to drive social change and the advancement of women in the technology industry. Thank you for listening to Tech in the Right Direction. We now rejoin our host, Jennifer Didier, with today's guest.
So you're a published author as well. So tell us more about your book, Growth IQ.
Well, that was sort of another one of those, accidents that happened. I was watching a Oprah Winfrey show long before her show ended, and she had this one show that was about like listening to whispers in your life. And in this particular example she was giving, it was on the negative side. Like someone shows you who they are early on. It was, it wasn't a positive message, but what I took out of it was listening to those whispers that the universe is sending you. Sometimes they're obvious, like you should do this. Someone literally says it to you, or it's, all of a sudden you were thinking about something and then an email shows up about the same topic, or an article or a podcast or a movie or whatever, and you're like, oh, well, maybe that's trying to tell me something. And writing the book was one of those for me, where it was this little slow drum roll of this whisper of, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book. And I don't actually enjoy the medium of writing. I'm a talker, not a writer. And so my hesitation was I had actually talked myself right into the fear of failing miserably at writing a book. So I always say I'm not a writer, which I just said again. And I have to stop saying it because I keep saying it, because now everyone's like, when are you writing your next book?
You
like,
are
oh my God,
now.
right? And I'm not
Yep.
writing another one because I'm not a writer, right? I'm right back into the same mindset again. That's what happened. And so I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Seth Godin, who you may know, he's the cover quote on my book. And he and I have known each other since 2000 or 2001. We've known each other quite a long time. And he was the one that was it went from a whisper to a, kind of a slap on the shoulder to a baseball bat to the entire house falling on your head like a cartoon. Right. And so, he was the house falling on my head. He literally put his hand on my forearm and looked me dead center in the eye. And he said a number of things, but the ending of what he said was, you need to write a book. Mm-hmm. And I walked away going, okay, when Seth Godin tells you need to write a book, you probably need to write a book. So that began the journey of writing the book. And I had to really find a way, because as you mentioned, you first met me when I was speaking at an event for WIT, and I speak a lot, and so that's my medium of choice. And so how do you get that sort of tone, storytelling arc, voice that people are very familiar with on paper, mm-hmm. where if someone else wrote my book, you would know it right away, right? Because it's just not the way I speak. Mm-hmm. And so if it was too heavily edited, it would also fall flat. It needed to be true to who I am and how I tell stories. So I actually just stood up and each chapter gave a keynote, recorded it, transcribed it, and then that's how I began the chapter. And so it allowed me to kind of blend both of my, the sort of keynote and taking a longer form story. And then I just had a second piece of advice that was the most brilliant thing ever. It was a gentleman by the name of Peter, who helped me with my proposal early on in my book when I was trying to get an agent and a publisher. And he also looked me dead center in the eye and he said, write the book you would want to read. Mm. So I have a very short attention span. I like stories to tell me what they're trying to tell me. I don't like very dense, heavy books that are kind of complicated for me to follow the story. You know what I mean? And yeah. I don't need 250 pages to tell me the same thing that they've told me on page 50. Mm-hmm. So I literally read 75 business books and I said, where are the gaps? What did I like? What didn't I like? What stood out? What didn't stand out? What really spoke to me? What didn't say? And I took all of that and kind of put it together in my voice, and told the stories that about growth that I had been telling for some time, both as an executive, like how I grew the business, as well as advising some of the largest tech companies in the world on how they should grow their business. So that's sort of the long answer to a very short question.
No, that's great. And that's one of the whispers in my ears for many, many years. And I have to figure out how to do it, and more importantly, even what the topic is going to be, because I've got so many things in my head. And so this gives me at least a little bit of direction as to what you've done so that I can follow, because I have the same ideas as your thought process. I have a short attention span and want to cut through the chase, get to what I need to get to, and move on. So very, very good advice. So you are really passionate about business growth, sales, marketing. What are some unconventional strategies you've used that have been successful?
From a growth perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was the 10th path in the book, called Unconventional Strategies. And initially, when I started down the path of writing the book, I thought that was going to be, I was looking for the next freemium model. Freemium was sort of this unconventional thinking many, many years ago, mm-hmm. Give it away up front, let them try it for 90 days, or, ad-based, let them have it for free. And if they want to get rid of the advertisement, they have to pay, but, mm-hmm. Get them in the door with that freemium. So I was looking across the horizon, okay, what's the next freemium? What do I think is going to be something that impactful for growth? And when I started working here at Salesforce, actually, a lot of our culture is around purpose over profit, and kind of the business is the greatest platform for change, two statements of which our CEO says quite often. And I figured that, I'm in a very different stage in my career, and I want that unconventional strategies to be about that purpose over profit, mm-hmm. thinking more broadly about how can we just be better, stewards of our communities, our employees, our customers, our broader shareholders, in a way that allows us to not only make them successful, but in turn make us successful. Mm-hmm. And that really resonated with me. So when I think unconventional strategies, I like to say that I feel like it's all about being uncomfortable. If we just sort of show up every day and we're comfortable with the day to day, that we're not stretching ourselves to try something that we maybe don't know whether it's going to work or not. And I think that's where everybody is, in a forced uncomfortable state right now. And so taking advantage of that and saying, okay, if I'm going to be uncomfortable and lots of things are going to fail, like, let's try some stuff, right? Because we have an opportunity, outside of all the horrible implications that we're dealing with COVID and the social injustice. On the flip side of that, it's also this huge pause from a business perspective that we may never get again. And I don't mean people aren't working, and I don't mean customers aren't buying, and I don't mean people aren't selling. I mean, there's a little bit of forgiveness in the fact that, you know what, let's carve 20%, 25% of our time and go out there and try some new things. And I think being uncomfortable is part of that unconventional strategy. And so that's how I'd answer that.
Really, that's so true. Uncomfortable really gets you to grow, because if you're comfortable, you're kind of status quo. You're the same, doing the same things over and over again. And you always talk about stretching your confidence muscle. And as women, we need to really build that confidence and help each other and lift each other up so that we can go into new things, or even in the technology industry, jump in with both feet and portray that confidence that we need in order to succeed. So I think that's great. We're in unprecedented times right now, and as you know, many businesses are thriving, some are struggling. What are some pieces of advice that struggling businesses can do now that will help them grow, once the pandemic is over? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I feel like this. I tend not to use the term new normal. I don't like it for a lot of reasons. I don't actually like normal. That's what bothers me, because I feel like what we left had so much opportunity for improvement. And, no matter what you hear from people, from a digital perspective, right, digitizing the back office as well as investing in the front office, that we've seen more digital transformation in the last 6 months than we'd seen 5 years previous, right? And that's because lots of people were digging their heels in to say, I don't see the return, I don't see the value, it's not the most pressing thing. And then all of a sudden, it was really important. So I call it the next future, and people sometimes will go, well, next and future means the same thing. And I go, but I'm playing on the new normal, new being next, normal being future. Do you know what I'm saying? And so that's sort of the thinking behind it. And I'd say that, I feel like habits change in about 60 or 80 days. And so lots of buying habits have changed, business habits have changed, organizational structures have changed. And the question is, how much of it will snap back, and how much of it will stay as it is now, or how much of it will fall somewhere in the middle? And I think this is where companies have an opportunity to really reimagine. If they could just, if COVID had not happened, what would they be doing? And then COVID has happened. And so what's the scenarios of if we stay locked down for 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months, or whatever the term you want to use? There's no vaccine, travel's not happening again. You know what I mean? Like trade shows, depending on what industry you're in, building out scenarios to understand what is the impact for you over the short and long term, and then really revisiting that on a regular basis. But I would say the very first thing I would do is get closer to your employees during this time. As well, get closer to your customers, because those two constituencies are the greatest kind of lighthouse for you to figure out what should you be doing in the future.
That's great advice. I think this is the time to step back and think about your business. Like you said, what if COVID didn't happen? What would I be doing? What do I want to do? And then just start, jumping in with your employees, with your customers. Love that. So what are some business lessons that you've learned throughout your career? I'm sure you've had some that pop out in your mind that really have taught you something that you can still refer to today.
This is sort of a statement I say quite often, which is trust the process. I would say that is something that I intuitively trusted the process. And I'll give you an example. In my 30s, I changed jobs almost every 18 months, and I was considered a higher risk. well, you just keep hopping around. Why are you hopping around? Are you a bad employee? You don't deliver. But actually, I was a high performing seller. Like that wasn't it. I wanted more. I wanted more challenge. I wanted more opportunity, and things like that. And they weren't, whoever I was working for was not willing to give me more responsibility, or there was nothing available for me at that time. And so I would leave. And so I didn't know why that was valuable for me until I landed at Gartner. And when I landed at Gartner, it was like I was talking to channel chiefs. Oh, wow, I'd been one. I was talking to heads of sales. Oh, I'd been a seller and I'd run sales organizations. I was talking to customer service. Well, I'd run customer service organizations. I was talking to CMOs and I'd run marketing organizations. And while they may not have been as big as the ones that I had worked at, or I didn't have their large of a remit, I still spoke their language and understood, what they were asking, so I could give a much more relevant and personalized answer, if you will. And so trust the process to me is one that when you're young, you're like, whatever, like I'm in a hurry. I can't get there fast enough, et cetera. And so in my 30s, it was about amassing more and more responsibility, control, title, income, all, it was very, consumption. And then in my 40s, it was sort of, how am I finding these new superpowers, which was, telling stories in unique ways and seeing patterns and signals that I could help businesses grow. And then in my 50s, it's really about, kind of contribution. So how do I take all those things I've learned along the way and how do I sort of give it back? And so I'm going to go back to the trust the process, because I think that is something that, had I learned it early on, and the flip side of trust the process is don't sweat the small stuff. Like, those would be the two pieces of, and that's not really business advice, right? It's really about personal, that you have to trust your gut and your own instincts. And if you make a wrong decision, unless you're a surgeon and you're going to kill somebody, like it's okay. You can recover. And then I would say finding a place where you can really have an impact and love what you get to do every day. I mean, I'm super blessed. I work for an amazing company. I have a dream job. I feel like on a daily basis, I get to make some level of an impact. So, I feel like I'm in the right place.
That's great. And I loved that you said, you are where you are supposed to be, which is really trusting the process and knowing that at this time in my life, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and not always try to rush and get to that next thing when things are going well. So as a woman in a male-dominated industry, we all have some challenges that we faced. What are some of those challenges and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, this is always a very tough question for me to answer because, maybe I'm being totally naive, but I don't feel like I ever got a job because I was a woman. And then I don't feel like I ever didn't get a job because I was a woman. And so once again, could be totally naive, right? It could have happened a dozen times and I have no idea, but I never felt that way. And so, I can say that I definitely notice it because I get the opportunity to meet with and sell to the executive level of sort of global 5,000 kinds of companies and even small and medium businesses as well. But it is definitely noticeable the lack of women that I could be in a room with 15 leaders from a company and there's no women in there at all. And I think the difficult thing for me has been getting a more male dominated audience to listen, believe, and value my input. And, I can only lead the horse to water. But I think what has helped me is what has been behind my name. So, I was an executive at these particular brands or as a research fellow at Gartner. And now I'm, a chief innovation and growth evangelist at Salesforce. Like the Salesforce, Gartner, whatever brand it was, helped with that credibility versus Tiffani Bova from Tiffani Bova's consulting shop, maybe not so much. And maybe I'm totally misreading that. And, whenever I say that, many people will say, oh, that's ridiculous. I think you could. And it's just I don't really feel that it hurts me, but I definitely feel like it helps me. So, I feel like I know that it is prevalent. I know that it's an issue because I can see just from the executive landscape what it looks like out there. but there's so many more women than I used to see. I've been doing this 30 years now. So, ultimately I feel like we're definitely going in the right direction, but, not as fast as we could. And I think diversity and inclusion is much broader than male and female. It's beyond gender, it's race, it's religion, it's, language, it's where you've come from, it's
Right.
thinking styles, it's introverts, it's extroverts, there's all kinds of differences. And so it's not just about being a woman.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you portray so much confidence in your presentation that I think that's one of the reasons why you probably didn't feel that you didn't get hired or got hired because you're a woman, because you know your material, you're confident, you go out there and you make it happen. And that makes a huge, huge difference. And I think we can all learn, from you as to really knowing your material and portraying that with very high level of confidence. So in closing, what advice would you have to give a woman, our listeners, who's considering a career in the technology industry and obviously, maybe a little hesitant? What advice would you give her?
So, I think there's a couple. I'll just give one, but I feel like finding and aligning yourself with champions over the course of your career is really important. And I mean that differently than mentors. I often get asked, "Hey, would you be my mentor?" And I'm always flattered by the ask. But I feel like it has to naturally happen. Like you feel a connection, you sense that there's some, symbiotic learning to happen. And you're like, oh, this is and it kind of naturally happens without formally going, you're my mentor, you're my mentee. Right.
Right.
And then I also feel like that champion role is someone who doesn't mentor you necessarily, but knows your worth and your value and will, speak positively of your name when you're not in the room. There's a project, I think, Tiffani should do it. And, hey, look, we're looking to fill this role. I think Tiffani, and they're not a mentor, it's a champion. And those are two very different things. And so I think having a very strong network around you, people you either look up to and follow, that may be a champion for you. And then if you are lucky enough to really connect with somebody where they're willing to be that mentor, it's really, really powerful. But all of that requires you to make the effort. And sometimes that's hard for those that are introverts or don't like to ask for things and don't have that outgoing, potentially personality to go and make those connections. And so I feel like this might actually be the time for the introvert because, the face-to-face seller is not out in the field anymore. Right now, it's all over the phone. And so it may work, in their favor. So, that would be sort of what I would say.
That's great advice. Tiffani, it was an honor having you on my show. Thank you. I'm truly grateful. If listeners wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get you?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm active there. You could follow me on Twitter. It's at Tiffani_Bova, and Tiffani is spelt with an I at the end. And my book, Growth IQ, my podcast is What's Next with Tiffani Bova across all the streaming platforms. That's the best way to get in touch with me.
That's great. Well, thank you again. Hope to have you on a future show. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tech in the Right Direction. Please take a minute to subscribe or follow so that you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thank you. See you next week.
From IT skill enhancements to end-user adoption training, Directions Training is your resource to help optimize the effectiveness of your technology investments. Over 500,000 students have taken advantage of our wide selection of technology and business training solutions covering the most popular applications today, such as Microsoft 365, Azure, Windows 10, and more. As a podcast listener, we invite you to take advantage of an exclusive offer. Receive 30 days of free access to our Microsoft official curriculum on-demand courses for IT professionals or end users. Visit us at www.directionstraining.com/podcast to claim this offer today. Hurry, this offer is only available for a limited time. Success is a journey. Ask for directions.